Can someone actually explain to me why England are physically incapable of winning a football match normally? Seriously, we could be playing against 10 traffic cones and I'd still expect us to somehow make it stressful. On Monday morning in the UK, England went to play at the Azteca, one of the toughest stadiums in the world of football. 80,000 Mexican fans behind their team. Don't forget, this is a World Cup knockout match, and there was a storm delay before kickoff. The stadium is already at a high altitude. It is the sort of atmosphere that can make even the best players look ordinary. But for about half an hour, probably more though, England actually looked brilliant. Jude Bellingham decided that for roughly 2 minutes he was the best footballer on the planet. We raced to a 2-goal lead. I was relaxed, I was happy. I was even beginning to think, you know what, this has actually been quite comfortable. Well, clearly I was wrong, because from that point onwards, England seemed determined to test the blood pressure of every single supporter watching around the world. There was a red card, 2 penalties, wave after wave of Mexican attacks, and 11 minutes of added time that somehow felt longer than the entire group stage. England are through to the quarterfinals. I still don't quite know how. But we're going to break it down today because this game had absolutely everything. Now, before we even get onto the football, can we just appreciate how ridiculous the build-up to this match already was? The game couldn't even start on time. A storm rolled over Mexico City, delaying kickoff and leaving both teams waiting around wondering when they were actually going to play. So now I hope FIFA are now regretting not changing the kickoff time like everyone else wanted, because this is hardly the ideal preparation before one of the biggest games of the tournament. But eventually the storm cleared, the teams emerged, and then came 90 minutes at the Azteca. And if you've never watched football at the Azteca before, well, I haven't either, so I can't really comment, but I'm still going to try to describe it to you. Because this just isn't another football stadium. It is one of the most iconic grounds on the planet. It is one of the spiritual homes of football. When Mexico play here, it feels like the stadium itself is trying to drag the ball into the opposition goal. Every tackle gets cheered. Every interception gets celebrated, every pass is celebrated, and every opposition touch is greeted with boos and whistles. It was hostile, and it was exactly what you would expect from a World Cup knockout game. Honestly, I kind of loved it. This is what football should be, in my opinion. The hostile atmosphere, the huge pressure, the massive occasion. This is where you can find out who can actually handle the biggest moments. Now, I actually thought England started this game well. Not because we completely dominated the possession, far from it actually, but we were creating chance after chance. And we didn't panic, and the opening 15-20 minutes, Mexico tried to turn this into complete chaos. They were pressing aggressively, they were flying into challenges, and they were trying to force mistakes high up the pitch. The crowd were absolutely loving it. And you could also tell that they wanted to drag England into an emotional game. And for a few minutes, it almost worked. More towards the beginning, as Declan Rice was booked for a yellow card 2 minutes into the entire game. England also looked a little rushed in possession, their passes weren't quite sticking, and the tempo did feel a little frantic. But then when they finally cooled down, Declan Rice started getting on the ball, and England started to control the match. They settled, and they looked a whole lot calmer. And that was when Jude Bellingham started finding little pockets of space between Mexico's midfield and defence. Saka was isolating fullbacks, and Harry Kane dropped deeper to link play like he so often does. And so quietly and slowly but surely, England did start to take control. Not complete control, but there was enough you could feel the momentum was shifting. The atmosphere was still incredible, and Mexico was still dangerous. But England actually looked like a team who were asking more intelligent questions. Now here's the thing about Jude Bellingham. There are players who play well, there are also players who dominate games, and then there are players who only seem to appear when the biggest moments arrive. And that is Jude Bellingham. In the space of about 2 minutes, he completely changed the game. The first goal was everything you want from England. Patient build-up from the back with quick movement and a great width. Mexico was stretched just enough, and then, hey Jude, suddenly it's 1-0 England. The Azteca was almost silent, save for the England fans. This was great in my eyes. England had already scored, and I celebrated probably a little too much. But then again, I had absolutely no idea what was about to happen next. Because before Mexico had even finished wondering what had gone wrong, England struck again. Almost straight from the restart, England forced a mistake. Declan Rice was brilliant at winning the ball back high up the pitch. Harry Kane made himself available immediately, and the ball worked quickly. Mexico's defensive shape hadn't covered, and who was arriving in exactly the right place again? It was that man again, Jude Bellingham. 2 goals in the space of barely 2 minutes. I know everyone had talked about the altitude of the Azteca being something that could trip up England, but forget altitude, it was looking more like altitude at this point. It felt very much like England had 1 foot in the quarterfinals already, and Jude Bellingham had completely taken over the game. But this just wasn't about the goals. His first touch looked perfect. He was carrying the ball through the midfield, he was winning duels, he was tracking back defensively, and he was demanding possession. This was one of those performances where you stop noticing individual moments because he's involved in almost everything good England were doing. And this is becoming a habit now, as when England needs someone to grab a game by the scruff of the neck, more often than not, it's Jude Bellingham. But do you know what's funny about football? The second you start thinking the game is comfortable, football has an incredible habit of reminding you that you've learned absolutely nothing. Because at 2-0, I'm already thinking ahead. England are playing some lovely football, Declan Rice is controlling the midfield, Jude Bellingham has just turned into the best player on the pitch, and the Azteca has gone silent. Everything feels strangely calm. And whenever an England fan starts feeling calm, you should know what's coming next. Because England don't seem to do calm. Okay, now to Mexico's credit, they could have folded. Going 2 goals down in front of your own supporters in a World Cup knockout game would have broken plenty of teams. Instead, it seemed to wake them up, as the tackles became harder, the pressing became much more aggressive, and the crowd suddenly found their voice again. And every time a Mexican player went charging into a challenge, the stadium erupted. I think this caused England to get a bit scared, because to me it felt like they were no longer playing with the same confidence they had 10 minutes before. And then came the goal. If we're being honest, England probably saw it coming, because Mexico had been growing into the game for 10 or 15 minutes. They were getting more bodies forward, they were winning second balls, and they were keeping England pinned inside their own half. Eventually, something had to give. And that was where Julian Quiñones gets his goal. Suddenly, it's 2-1. It was a messy corner, I would admit, and like I said before, it was probably coming, but now it meant that everything had changed. The crowd had completely exploded, the noise was unbelievable, and the Mexico players were feeding off of it, and I think they were believing that they could actually come back and win, which was probably why England also didn't look so comfortable. It does go to show what 1 goal can do in football. 5 minutes earlier, they were cruising, and now they're counting down the seconds until half time. Something I was relieved for when the ref finally blew for half time. So, yeah, England desperately needed the half-time break. Not because we played badly, far from it really. For large parts of the first half, we had actually been the better team. But momentum had completely swung, and against a team playing in front of 80,000 supporters, momentum can become a dangerous thing. And I imagine Thomas Tuchel's team talk was probably quite simple. Calm everyone down, slow the game down, and try and take the sting out of the atmosphere. Don't give Mexico an early chance, and that was probably something I hoped he was saying, because I was terrified that England would come out for the second half slow, lethargic, sloppy. Mexico would come out completely on it, and it would be 2-2 before it was even 50 minutes. It didn't happen that way, thankfully, but football did have other ideas. The opening 10 minutes of the second half were horrible. Not because Mexico were creating chance after chance, but because you could feel something coming. England just couldn't get a hold of the ball. Mexico were first on almost every loose pass, and the crowd was sensing every attack before it even happened. You know those games where you're sat watching thinking, I don't like where this is going. I felt like this was this game. It wasn't panic, not yet anyway, it was just unease. And then everything changed when Joel Quansah went in to tackle a Mexico player. He got the ball, but he also went in studs up against, it was more like his knee shin area. I'll probably show a clip there. Either way, that can be very dangerous, and it was unsurprising when the referee showed him a red card. I did feel bad for him though. He had actually handled himself pretty well up until this point, and considering the stage and the atmosphere, he looked quite composed. But then came that challenge. Sure, I get he didn't do it on purpose, and I'm sure there was no malice in the tackle, it was just too high, which, like I said before, it was dangerous, so it was also very clearly a red card. and whenever a referee walks over to that monitor, it is highly likely that he will see red. So now, as well as Thomas Tuchel having more right back issues, England now have over half an hour to survive with 10 men at the Azteca, which is not ideal, to put it mildly. I thought we were in serious trouble, because 10 men in an incredibly hostile atmosphere, I reckon England would have been incredibly lucky to get out there with a win. And Mexico knew it, so they started throwing bodies forwards, subbing on attackers and just trying to break England's defence. It was getting very stressful to be an England fan, but I do have to give England enormous credit. They didn't completely lose their heads, and I have seen England teams in the past concede under pressure and completely collapse. The heads go down, the players stop demanding the ball, everyone panics. But it didn't happen here. Instead, they somehow found another gear mentally. They became organised, compact, disciplined, and nobody started pointing fingers. Nobody looked defeated. They just kept going. Which is why, despite all of Mexico's momentum, a clever play from Anthony Gordon saw the Mexico keeper Raul Rangel take him out, meaning penalty for England. And at this point, I'm thinking, surely Harry Kane scores this. And surely, finally, England can relax. Though the last time Harry Kane did take a high pressure penalty, it didn't end well. Thankfully, Harry Kane does what Harry Kane does best. But Anthony Gordon also deserves a lot of the credit here. He was not good in the group stage, but in the last 2 games, he has been amazing. He's never stopped running, and he has been causing chaos for defenders. And then Harry Kane. I don't care what happens in this World Cup, but this man deserves a knighthood. Because it doesn't matter whether it's a World Cup knockout game, a Premier League match in November, or a Sunday kickabout in the park. He treats every penalty exactly the same, and he scores it. So now it's 3-1, and I'm thinking, surely England have done it now. I mean, we're not making this game difficult again. Right? Right? Well, not exactly. As Harry Kane soon went from hero to zero in a Mexico corner as his attempted clearance somehow brought down a Mexico player, the ref did point to the spot, penalty again. With no bias intended, I honestly didn't think it was a penalty. Either way, the ref still pointed at the spot, so it doesn't really matter what I think, but yeah. Harry Kane was trying to go for the ball, he unfortunately hit the man's shin. Big deal. This also came after the referee once again went to look at the monitor, so I now think VAR might be up there for man of the match. It was almost omnipresent, as it was basically almost there for every big moment. Going back to the penalty to Mexico, I was ready to get on my knees and pray to Jordan Pickford to save it. Unfortunately, Raul Jimenez steps up and makes no mistake. The score is now 3-2, and it's game on. Again. So if your heart hadn't already gone through the roof, I'm sure it definitely had now. I am also convinced football changes the laws of time, because there is absolutely no way the final 20 minutes of this game lasted only 20 minutes. It felt like 2 hours for me, because it felt like a siege for England as they settled into a defensive wall on the edge of the box. And every time a Mexico cross came in, England would just clear it away, thankfully. However, the ball always came straight back. England were defending as if their lives depended on it, but an enormous amount of credit must go to Jordan Pickford, as whenever England need him, he's almost always delivered. His handling was excellent, he commanded his penalty area brilliantly, and he slowed the game down when England desperately needed a breather. Perhaps most importantly, he looked calm, and that spread through the defence, I would say like butter. Because when your goalkeeper looks composed, everyone else settles down and they get the job done. And that was exactly what England needed and what England did. Pickford also gave away absolutely nothing cheaply, and in knockout football, that is priceless. I also think the backline deserves a lot of praise, because defending for 30 minutes with 10 men is exhausting. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. You're constantly concentrating, communicating, reacting, but it was fine because Ezri Konsa and Mark Gahey were always there. John Stones looked every bit the experienced leader, and Dan Burn was heading everything away and throwing himself into challenges as if someone had personally offended him. So every time Mexico looked to attack, the England defence just shut it down completely. Was it pretty? Absolutely not. But was it effective? Just about. Though sometimes defending isn't glamorous. It's simply about wanting to block the shot more than the striker who wants to score. and England certainly had that mentality. Eventually, after what felt like an entire Netflix series worth of added time, the referee finally blew the whistle. England 3, Mexico 2. England are through to the quarterfinals. And when the whistle finally blew, I will be honest, I was more relieved than happy, because that had been a stressful last 20 minutes. And for all of Gareth Southgate's faults, yes, we probably would have lost that game under him, but I also don't think those last 20 minutes of stress would have happened under him, because England probably would have just sat back for half the game. So you cannot deny that Thomas Tuchel has definitely made England games more exciting. But questions do also need to be asked as to whether England can control games better, because Mexico dominated England for the most part. And teams like France, and especially Erling Haaland and Norway, will try to punish England if they keep making life unnecessarily difficult for themselves. But most importantly, for the sake of my blood pressure, please stop making these games so stressful. A World Cup knockout game is already stressful as it is. Despite this, I actually came away feeling more positive about this game, because tournaments are very rarely won by playing perfect football every single match. Eventually, every team gets dragged into a horrible game. Every champion has one match where nothing goes according to plan. And in a hostile atmosphere with all the momentum against them, and maybe a red card gets dished out, which makes things harder for everyone. The question is, can you still find a way through? And that is what England did. I think that is an incredibly important mentality to have. Years ago, this would be exactly the sort of game that England lose. Honestly, years ago, I don't even think England would have got this far. Probably also because they would have panicked and conceded late. Then England fans spend the rest of the week asking what went wrong. Instead, this group dug in, they suffered, they defended, and somehow they survived. Which says something about this team. But before I finish, we have to come back to one man. Jude Bellingham. Because when this game is remembered, people will rightly talk about the red cards, the atmosphere, the penalties, the drama, but none of it matters if England didn't have Jude Bellingham in that first half. He was exceptional. And once again, when England needed someone to take responsibility, he stepped forward. And big players produce big moments, and Jude Bellingham has a habit of producing them in an England shirt. We are incredibly lucky to have this man, and it is also why he is my man of the match for this game. He was simply incredible. So now England are into the quarterfinals. Was it comfortable? Not even remotely. Was it pretty? Definitely not. Was it entertaining? You could say that. But if every knockout game is going to be like this, I might need to book an appointment with a cardiologist before the next round. So now, let me know what you made of the game down in the comments below, and let me know, who is your man of the match? Was Jude Bellingham the obvious choice, or do you think someone like Jordan Pickford deserves more credit for what England did after going down to 10 men? If you have enjoyed today's video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss my reaction to England's quarterfinal. As always, thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.